Okay, another big story now, and a co-founder of the Good News International Church in Malindi now wants stern action taken against controversial preacher Paul Mackenzie. Ruth Kahindi, who started the church with Mackenzie in 2003, says she fell out with Mackenzie over differences in doctrine. With more is Helen Aura.
Ruth Kahindi recalled her early years in ministry, which she says were filled with great doings of the Lord as she was leading a great ministry known as House of the Lord in 2003. This was in partnership with Paul Mackenzie, who she so dearly remembered him as a young, disciplined man who was zealous for the things of God.
Alikuwa ni mtu ambaye ni kijana anayendelea vizuri. Hata mambo ya kuwa ati atafananishwa na mashetani ilikuwa.
The two had met at Malindi Baptist Church when Ruth switched churches from PEFA upon her husband's request. While she got involved in ministry at Malindi Baptist, she also became well acquainted with Mackenzie and his gifting.
Siku nyingine akapewa kipindi cha ibada ya katikati ya wiki. Ndio alihubiri kitabu cha Uzia. Kwamba Uzia wakati huo ulikuwa ni afe ndio kazi ya Mungu iendelee. Watoto wake wa yule mzee Morris Wanje wako hapo. Hasa wakachukua yale mahubiri ni kama ambaye anaambiwa babake kwamba wakati akifa basi labda huyu Mackenzie ndio atachukua ye kanisa na ataendelea. Ilipofika Jumapili Mackenzie akaambiwa hakuna tena kuabudu hapa. Manake mahubiri yako sio sawa.
And that was when Kahindi took Mackenzie and they started their own church known as House of the Lord in 2003. It was all rosy up until Mackenzie saw how the church was on the rise. He is said to have tried to kick Kahindi to the curb, little by little changing the doctrines of what the church stood for.
Muda mchache akaanza hii story ya kuwa watu wasikule madawa. Akaanza kuhubiri hivyo. Alipomaliza siku nyingine nikaenda nikamketisha mahali. Nikamwambia mchungaji, mbona unaanza kuongea namna hii? Wa watoto kutolewa shuleni, wasisome tena, elimu ni dhambi, serikali inafanya vibaya. Aliyesoma akiwa na makaratasi yake na kazi ya kiserikali na aache.
And that is how Kahindi lost grip of her church and family, as her children soon became Mackenzie's aides, up until the recent headlines that unearthed the exhumation of more than 100 bodies linked to Paul Mackenzie's church. Kahindi says she is not sure whether her daughter is still alive, but her son-in-law is currently in police custody. She wants authorities to take stern action against Mackenzie for misleading many Kenyans. Helen Aura, NTV.
Workers in the country are a disappointed lot after President William Ruto failed to expressly increase the minimum wage. President Ruto, however, opted to pursue policy reforms into what he termed as general wage. NTV's Brian George explains other rafts of reforms that the president is pursuing.
It's a big win for employers on Kenya Kwanza's debut Labor Day commemoration as President William Ruto steered away from an upward minimum wage revision. To the utter disappointment of the workers drawn from virtually all industries represented at Uhuru Gardens, President Ruto rather considered a long-term policy review toward general wage. The Federation of Kenya Employers said the previous adjustment grossly affected employers.
Ondoe tofauti ambayo iko kati ya wafanyikazi wa umma wafanyikazi wa private sector. We must harmonize how we treat all our workers so that all workers work for equal pay that is fair and that ensures hata tukisema minimal wage lazima tukubaliane how do we arrive at minimal wage, how do we arrive at a decent, livable wage.
On Labor Day 2022, then President Uhuru Kenyatta announced that his government had raised the country's minimum wage from a previous 13,572 shillings to the current 15,201 shillings. This was a 12% increase in the wage. President Ruto now says Cabinet will consider drafting a draft wages and remuneration policy amid complaints by KOTU of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission's involvement in negotiations of collective bargaining agreements.
Ile mpango iko sasa for compensation around injuries at the place of work ni kwamba it is the employer who bears liability. We want to change the structure because some employers run away from that responsibility when it happens. We are going to change that whole framework so that it becomes a social insurance scheme called the Workers' Compensation Fund, so that it is predictable, so that every worker has access, na pia itakuwa rahisi kwa employers, so that employers don't carry too much burden when their employees are injured.
If the reforms proposed by the president see light of day, then employers stand to win again big time, as they will not be required to pay work injury benefits in full in the unlikely but possible event of an injury of an employee at work. President Ruto now wants the enactment of Workers' Compensation Fund aimed at incentivizing employers. Brian Jodotieno, NTV, Nairobi.
Na wasambazaji wanasema hatutakuwa na blackouts kuanzia leo. Blackouts out.
President William Ruto has said his administration is doing all it can to ensure the cost of living goes down. A move he says will ensure food security in the country. Further, he says there have been successful talks with millers who've agreed to revise unga prices downward, while issuing a warning to those who are yet to effect the changes.
Unga sio ya kwamba inapunguzwa bei ati kwa shelf. Unga inaanza kupunguzwa bei kwa kumsaidia mkulima shambani azalishe chakula ya kutosha, ndio chakula ikue kingi, ikifika pale sokoni iwe bei yake imepungua. Tunaelewana? Hata ubebe sufuria kwa kichwa siku ngapi, bei ya unga itapungua kwa kuweka sufuria kwa kichwa? Mimi nimesikia mumesema bado. Mimi nataka niwaambie hivi. Hii bei ilikuwa 230. Si ni kweli? Saa hizi ukienda kwa shelf, na mimi nataka niwaambie, endeni hapa Quickmart ama uende Naivas, utakuta iko ya shilingi 200, iko ya shilingi 180, iko ya shilingi 170, iko ya shilingi 158. Wewe ndio utaamua utanunua gani.
Beginning July this year, NHIF deductions for low-income earners are set to reduce to 300 shillings from 500 shillings as part of the ongoing reforms by the government to ensure equality in attaining accessible quality healthcare. This means the monthly contributions will be capped according to an individual earner's bracket. President William Ruto says all Kenyans will be expected to contribute 2.7% of their earnings.
Haiwezekani kwamba mimi rais nalipa shilingi 1,700 kila mwezi, na mama mboga na mtu ya bodaboda analipa shilingi 500 ili akuwe na kadi ya NHIF. Mimi mshahara yangu ni 1,000,000. Yule bodaboda mapato yake ni 5,000. Kuna ungwana pale kweli? So nimesema tumebadilisha the contribution mechanism and the contribution formula. Sasa yule ambaye mlikuwa mnalipa kwa NHIF shilingi 500, sasa tutateremusha chini ikuje shilingi 300 kwa wale mmekuwa mkilipa shilingi 500. Kuanzia mwezi wa 7 tukikamilisha budget na mimi ambaye ni rais ambaye nimekuwa nishikilipa shilingi 1,000, sasa mimi nitalipa shilingi 27,500, na hawa wengine katikati hapo watalipalipa hapo kidogo namna hiyo.
President William Ruto has yet again thrown his weight behind the enforcement of Section 21 of the National Social Security Fund (NSSF), which has enhanced contributions to 6% of one's pensionable income, matched by another 6% by the employer. Speaking while making his debut Labor Day remarks, President Ruto stated that already the 330 billion shillings strong NSSF has witnessed a doubling of collections based on the numbers for February 2023.
In the last 2 months, baada ya sisi kuimplement 6%, pesa ya retirement ya wafanyikazi imeongezeka kutoka 1.2 billion every month. In the month of February, ilikuwa 2.5 billion. In the month of March, ilikuwa 3.5 billion. I promise you, in the next 3-4 months, it is going to be the maximum, which is going to be 6.5 billion shillings every month. Money that will be available to the Kenyan workers in retirement.
All right, we now take a look at the newspapers and what is contained therein this morning. We begin our perusal with the Daily Nation, and this is the headline story: Ruto's new salary plan for workers. President William Ruto, his deputy Rigathi Gachagua, and this is a caption accompanying this image, and COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli and other leaders yesterday at Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi during the Labor Day celebrations. This particular image, this photograph was taken by Dennis Songo of The Nation, and the Daily Nation details his pledge, and President William Ruto announced a new salaries policy that will set equal pay for workers in public and private sectors, even as he defended extra pension and medical deductions that have shrunk workers' pay slips. Sharing the front page is this highlight on a story on Raila Odinga protests. Rivals dig in amid calls for restraint. President Ruto and Azimio chief Raila Odinga have maintained hardline positions over today's planned opposition protests, even as calls for restraint dominated Labor Day celebrations. Also on the front page of the Daily Nation, at the very top, cult strangled members. Deadly beliefs: some of the victims of the cult operating in Kilifi's Shakahola village were killed by suffocation and strangulation. Post-mortem examination conducted yesterday on some of the 110 bodies exhumed has revealed. In particular, this happened with children, given the post-mortems, what the post-mortems already done indicate. I also see on the front page, Afrexim Bank disburses 408 billion shillings loan to Kenya. The Africa Export and Import Bank will today start the disbursement of a $3 billion economic support loan for Kenya, handing some temporary relief to a country facing deep financial headwinds. I see they've also highlighted on the front page a sports story, and Mikel Arteta: Arsenal is still in Premier League title race. On a lighter note, I saw a meme of a fellow carrying tables on his back. Looks like that joke about Arsenal being top of the table remains ripe. Okay, let's take a look now at the other dailies. Let's see what the Standard has for us this morning, and the headline story also has to do with workers, and it is: workers go home empty-handed amid protest talk. Employees expected to focus on the high cost of living and probably get a pay rise, but speaker after speaker took their time to rail at opposition over planned demonstrations today. The image they have on their front pages of President William Ruto and the COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli. President William Ruto has a word with COTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli during Labor Day celebrations at Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi yesterday, and also sharing the front pages this story, how this highlighted story, how Githunguri is guarding his billions in death. I'm just going to read the snippet that accompanies that is accompanying that headline. Court papers estimate worth worth at 1.8 billion shillings. Apart from iconic Lillian Towers, Stanley Githunguri also owned a 9.6-acre property at Inn Karen worth 700 million shillings. He has other properties in Nairobi's upmarket estates of Spring Valley, Lavington and Muthaiga, as well as shares in many NSE companies. He has entrusted his empire to daughters who will execute the will. I see also on the front page, but on the bottom left here, inside Mackenzie's doomsday teachings, using the Bible, pastor made claims that border on heresy, but his congregation grew. At the very top here of the Standard, I see Murathe cost of living likely to sink, Ruto government, chaos at Sudan port as locals flee, and will Arsenal sing the blues at Emirates? Okay, so let's now take a look at the Star before we get into the Taifa Leo and the Business Daily. And headline story on the front page of the Star that is before me here is Defiant Azimir. There's Ruto as cops ban demo. Raila says protest to start at 6 a.m. intends to present 4 petitions. And showdown, tough talking president vows to protect property. I also see at the very top here, City Clinic offers Kenyan amputees fast 3D printed legs in 3 days. Interesting story there. And I see also on the front page, Shakahola probe to include human organ harvesting, something Florence Machio had suspected the last time she was here. The probe into the cult deaths in Shakahola will extend to possible organ harvesting. Interior CS Kithure Kindiki yesterday said the government will lay bare all the details of the probe, including cases where bodies might be found without some organs. There have been claims some of the 110 bodies so far exhumed have vital organs missing. Nyanza flooding. More than 4,500 households have been affected by raging floods in Nyando, with fears of increased numbers as rains continue to pound different regions across the country. In Nyanza, villages have been marooned, houses submerged, with water covering access road. Okay, so I will leave the Star there and quickly pull up here Taifa Leo and Business Daily. Let's start with the Business Daily, and this is their front page headline story, and it reads: money from Kenyans abroad dips for the first time in 13 years. Inflationary pressures in the U.S. squeeze remittances. Transfers dropped by 1.1 billion shillings in quarter to March. This report by Kefa Mwirure. For more details, visit epaper.nation.africa on your device and you'll be able to purchase any of the newspapers that the Nation Media Group publishes. Banker John Ngumi pays 111 million shillings for his telecom deal fees. This report is by NTV, or now the NMG, Business and Technology Editor Julian's Amboko. Investment banker John Ngumi last month paid a tax of 111.9 million shillings from his juicy fee for advising the government's acquisition of Telkom Kenya Limited for 6.2 billion shillings. Let's take a look at the ticker now. And minimum wage intact despite high cost of living. Workers have missed out on a pay increase despite the high cost of living that is squeezing household budgets. President William Ruto was yesterday silent on calls by the workers' lobby to review the minimum wage. Stanchart cuts jobs for 8th straight year on automation. Standard Chartered Bank Kenya last spent 209 million shillings on redundancies, marking the 8th straight year of trimming its workforce amid an increased switch to digital banking. The lender discloses in its latest annual report that its workforce dropped by 59 to 1,061. And finally, on the ticker, Treasury bond yields surge exposes investors to losses. Treasury bond yields in the secondary market have risen to as much as 16.5%, exposing investors to losses from the sharp discounting of the security prices. The rising returns are largely attributable to interest rate pressures. And let us see back page of the Business Daily. This by James Muraguri. Policymakers should step up their efforts to curb inflation, boost domestic resource mobilization, and enact pro-growth reforms. The title there is MPs should focus on high-impact sectors in budget. And finally, let's take a look at, I saved the best for last, Taifa Leo, my best. Thoroughly enjoy it. Ruto Arusha Ahadi Zaidi, and on the front page image thereof, Francis Atwoli Kotu, Secretary General, President William Ruto, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. What does the caption read? Rais William Ruto jana aliorodhesha ahadi tele kuhusu mipango yake ya maendeleo itakayomwezesha kuletea Wakenya pesa mfukoni. And I see at the very top here, Kivumbi leo Azimio akiapa kuingiza wafuasi katikati mwa jiji la Nairobi. Raila alisisitiza waandamanaji hawatabeba silaha au kuharibu mali. And then I also see on the side here kwa vidokezo Shakahola, baadhi ya wadhiriwa walinyongwa. Uchunguzi wa mapema wa wanapatholojia wabaini vifo vilitokana na ukosefu wa oksijeni. And then yep, I will leave the Taifa Leo there, so we have a sense of what the top stories are post Labor Day. Good morning, ladies. With me in studio already we have Florence Machio, women's rights campaigner, and psychology specialist Lois Noel in studio with me. Lois, I think we walked into studio at about the same time. How are the roads when you were coming in?
By the time I was coming, the police were already getting in, quite a number. Got me a bit anxious, but also feeling a little secure that they are already manning the various places.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Florence?
History tells me, history of Maandamano, that the presence of police does not necessarily mean that it's going to be safe. For me, every time I see GSU, I know it's going to be chaos. So as I drove in, I saw at Hazel last roundabout a big truck, and they're coming out of their truck, and I wish it would be Maandamano the way I know it. The way when we're going out for women's rights activities and we're saying, you know, we demand this and we demand this, usually the police align themselves with us, work with us to just ensure nobody infiltrates our Maandamano as we go wherever we want to go and give petition. And usually you give your route, you know, where you're going to go. And so having the police there, for me, it no longer makes me feel safe. It just makes me realize that we're going to have running battles today. And so maybe we will hide here until everything is quiet.
You don't know what it took to get some of my panelists warning, they're like, Raila said 6.
So you will give us a working area for us to work from here today.
No problem, we'll accommodate you. I expect that we have joining us virtually Dr. Mary Goretti, Akinyi Otieno. She's a sociologist and has a background in anthropology as well. And Angela Minayo Kiktonet. And let me just check whether she's messaged me anything different from what she did, because initially she had asked if she could also join virtually. I told her town looks good so far. I hope I won't be forced to eat my words. Yes, I'm told we have Dr. Mary Goretti. Good morning.
Good morning, Olivia.
How are things where you are?
Where I am is quiet. Of course, I'm from the confines of my home, waiting to go to class in 3 hours' time. Yeah.
Oh, you have class in 3 hours' time?
Yes.
All right. We're struggling to hear her a little bit. If we could make it a bit more, slightly more audible, that would be fantastic. So, ladies, last week we began a conversation, and that was indecent exposure, the trend of you know, people sharing intimate videos, pictures of persons, at least as far as we know, in the public eye, either to embarrass them or extort them. I don't know what the motivation is. We saw Millie Odhiambo, when that happened with Millicent Omanga, stand up in Parliament and say this cannot be tolerated. There needs to be attached, because she said she's not a proponent of the death penalty. She said life imprisonment. So when Angela gets here, she can tell us a little bit about the legal provisions that are already in place, the Cyber Crimes Act, as well as, you know, your right to privacy, and perhaps what might require tweaking to make things more stringent. But also another question that arose the last time we were here was, and this one was raised by Bernard Ndong, the sports editor, NTV, and he was asking, is this evidence of moral decay? I think that's where we left it, if I recall correctly. Is this evidence, Lois, of moral, like have we further sunk into the mire of moral decay? Or what is this? Is this simply playing out in the public domain? What happens in the online domain? What already happens, the prejudices that already exist offline?
Yeah, thank you, Olive. It's a very kind of a dynamic issue in terms of where we would want to lean it on. But we know with every advancement in life comes the challenges that it brings and opportunities that it also brings together for everyone who is using that kind of space. So in technology, just as any other advancement that came, there is an opportunity for people who might not be well or who have, you know, we are big on certain mental challenges, to be able to use them against anyone, or to use it, to misuse it for that matter. And therefore, you know, I was reflecting actually on this issue, and I said, what's the best analogy that I can give? And I looked at fire, you know. Fire is so good. Fire can be used so well. But fire can also be the most devastating thing. Now, depending on what kind of fire you're using and what you're using it for, sometimes it dies down. Sometimes it only dies down when the source of that fire goes out, like say gas. Sometimes circumstances say if you're using electricity, maybe it will go off, but some of it burn and burn for, you know, for as long as you keep that fire on. So I'm looking at the digital platform and this digital space. It is like something that is on, and anyone can light it and keep it going on. And therefore, it's very important we come to the reality that as long as you are someone who is a celebrity or a leader, and we also talked about, I think Florence is big on, you're a woman, chances are that people will use this digital space to do certain things that they might not do to other people. Yeah. And so that's the reality that we have. And then I asked myself, are there still people who have succeeded in managing this social media, however dynamic it is? Now, what have they done so that they are not in this kind of spaces? And then maybe we can pick up from those evidence-based kind of management strategies that others have used. The number two, there are other people, because of their nature and the way they are and the threats they have to certain people, they might not escape this kind of, you know, exposure, and people looking for every sort of issue to be able to just cast it out there. And then I ask myself, if you're aware that you're such a person, then what should you do for you to be able to be ready? You know, ready, just like, you know, we all walk around and we know we can die, but how ready are we? How ready do we get for that? So it's important for people, certain people, to be able to get ready. And that means then you've got to sort of like know who you are and what the dangers and dynamics around you are. And then you sort of like just do some self-protection and get also some support just in case certain things are to happen. Kind of take up some emotional insurance so that you know you can lean on it when you have this kind of things, because we are human, and anything that of that nature is bound to really, you know, hurt us emotionally.
All right. Yeah. Florence, I was doing some reading on this, and while the high-profile individuals quite readily catch our attention, the data based on a UN report I was glancing at yesterday, and I'll pull it up on my touch screen, but it appears my touch screen keeps quitting, so I think it's still recovering from the Labor Day sherehe. And I tweeted this. So this is according to the UN Women's Gender Snapshot of 2022, and it says women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the last decade, a loss that will grow to 1.5 trillion by 2025 without action. Reversing this trend, and this is something that was raised by Dr. Mirigoreti the last time she was here, reversing this trend will require tackling the problem of online violence, which a study of 51 countries revealed 38% of women had personally experienced. How prevalent a problem in your experience, because you work in the SGBV space, yes. Florence, yes. Is this?
It's quite prevalent, and I think what we are now lacking is data to track online violence and gender segregated data, so that we can know these are the many numbers of women, these are the numbers of men. Mostly you will find women are affected when we look at anecdotal evidence. And I just pulled up, I'm happy you talked about the digital economy and the fact that with COVID, a lot of women, what we call now the gig economy, went online doing many things. I teach you how to cook, I get more online followers, and I'm making money out of it. So it's a space that needs to be kept safe for women. And one of the things, I know Honorable Harriet Chiga is in Geneva today, and one of the conversation is reducing the gender parity that denies women an opportunity to grow economically. So that's one of the things that they'll be discussing. But pulling back in terms of evidence, I was just looking at social media, and my sister here talked about where can we find evidence to see what has happened, and if we could borrow a leaf. And I was looking at Zimbabwe. There's a research done by Data2X. It is estimated, this is as recent as March of 2023, that over 70% of women have been exposed to or experienced online violence and harassment. And this typically happens, of course, on social media, but it greatly inhibits women's participation, either economically or otherwise, online. And one of the things that they did in Zimbabwe is through the International Foundation for Electrical Systems, IFES, they decided to create a tool to be able to track this digital violence. And they called it Violence Against Women in Elections Online Social Media Analysis Tool. It's called Brandwatch. And I'm thinking maybe this is something that we need to employ in this country, because it's becoming worse every single day. And if I could quote them, they said that we developed a hate speech lexicon, identifying words used on the internet to perpetuate hate speech and violence towards women. From the lexicon, we could find public threats of physical, sexual, and psychosocial violence towards women on social media platforms. So I think we need to be deliberate, just the way we are looking for data to inform development in all areas. We need to look for data online to be able to showcase how big a problem this is. At the moment, we'll be waiting for one case and then another case, and then we talk about it. But I think we need to be very deliberate in analyzing the social media space and protecting women and girls and children against online violence. And I think we all know that it's also through online violence that pedophiles also prey on children who are online for whatever reason. And you remember our children are COVID children, they were constantly online. And so also the perpetrators knew that children are now vulnerable, infiltrating Google Classrooms and all that. So we really need to go beyond even just women. We really need to go beyond that and create a tool to collect data that will inform development around protection on social media.
All right. And I need to take a break, but this is something that Dr. Mirigoreti had raised when we were last here, and she said how it impacts the economy and the economic empowerment of women. Finally, we are cooperating. And here is the tweet I was making reference to. Women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the last decade. Reversing this trend will require tackling online violence, which a study of 51 countries revealed 38% of women had personally experienced. And for those who are just joining us, this is the topic of conversation, Digit All, because this was the theme of the International Women's Day last month. 2 months ago. We are now in May. Mob injustice, online and ICT facilitated harassment and abuse. And KFCB actually released a statement, called for a press conference the day after we had the show on this very same issue. And it was on the rampant sharing of inappropriate audiovisual content on social media platforms. So we get into more detail. I find out whether Angela will be joining us virtually or in person on the other side. Tukutane on the other side of this break.
Otis, kijana yangu achana na wasichana.
Mama, wasichana gani jameni? Si mimi na Google formula.
Nimekuona uko kwa Instagram.
Sikuwa IG, nilikuwa na Google.
Google gani imejaa wasichana hivyo? Otis, dunia mbaya, wachana na hao wasichana.
Ai, wasichana wa gani mama?
Ukitaka bibi siku moja, enda kwa kanisa. Wachana na hii wasichana ya Instagram na TikTok.
Hata sina Instagram na TikTok.
Mwanamke ni roho.
Ai, tena si dada alisema ni tabia.
Sasa dad ni mwanamke. Si wacha nikwambie, mimi ndo najua mwanamke ni roho.
Mama, sikuwa naangalia mwanamke kwa Google.
Nyamaza nikwambie. Walisema mke mwema anatoka kwa Bwana. Unatoka unaenda wapi? Mke mwema anabaki kwa Bwana.
To get relationship advice by Mama Otis, dial *811*930#. Skiza, non-nation.
It's just that I feel a little insecure. What if I can't meet your standards?
Then you simply go back to Diego. Bridget, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong is I don't ever want to see you again. I refuse to be near someone who has such a low opinion of me.
You have to come with me. What? What's wrong with you? I'm not some bad criminal. They're still about to be determined. No, police officer. I just came here to pick up my daughter. Besides, look at how I am. See?
Look, it's better that you don't resist if you don't want me to use brute force on you, okay?
Hey, this is an outrage.
Head over heels.
Of flavor, fruity freshness in every sip.
The Federation of Kenya Employers has worked with the other social partners to come up with a decent work program for Kenya for the next 5 years. We aim to promote fair labor practices, the advancement and growth of enterprises, and to guarantee rights at work. The other aspect is the extension of social protection and promoting social dialogue. The Federation of Kenya Employers works with trade unions and employers to ensure that the terms and conditions of work for workers are fair and competitive. We do advocacy and we engage with government and other policy makers to be able to look at the policy and the regulatory environment in this country to try to make it more conducive to the requirements of business so that businesses can recover from the impact of COVID-19 and the other challenges that we are facing at a global level. As we celebrate Labor Day for this year, we want to commend employers for the great strides they have made towards the realization of the decent work agenda. And we also recognize the work done by our social partners, the trade unions, and the Ministry of Labor towards this end.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back to AM Live, and what we're looking at this morning is this. Digital mob injustice, online and ICT facilitated harassment and abuse. If you're just joining us, we have in studio Florence Machil, women's rights campaigner, Lois No psychology specialist, and Dr. Mary Goretti Akinyi Otieno, Department of Sociology, University of Nairobi, who I will be engaging in a minute because there's a question I'd like her to respond to that was raised by the Kenya Film Classification Board. And so this was the press release. This was last week on Wednesday, just the day, as I mentioned, after we had a conversation on this show on this very topic. The attention of and this is Angela who's calling me. I will get back to you in a second. The attention of the Kenya Film Classification Board has been drawn to the sharing of the graphic and disturbing audiovisual content on social media platforms in utter disregard of the interests and safety of children and other vulnerable members of society. As the ladies in studio already mentioned, in the recent past, the vice has not only become rampant, but also taken a disconcerting turn, with some bloggers and social media users sharing extremely offensive video content with the potential to cause harm. And they say a case in point is the recent streaming of graphic content of a mother killing a minor in Kitengela. At the same time, some social media users are increasingly misusing digital apps to host and stream live video sessions of explicit adult shows in blatant breach of the laws of the land. Indeed, some apps are being transformed into digital brothels from midnight onwards. Equally worrying is the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images or videos of individuals in violation of privacy laws. All these activities are happening at a time when children who are heavy users of the internet and social media are at home for the April holidays. And as a society, we need to step back for a moment and reflect on the following. And they say, are we losing, or this is the question they pose, are we losing the values that define us as a people? Dr. Mary Goretti?
Thank you, Olive. I'm getting you.
All right. So what's your response to that question that KFCB is raising? And they're asking, are we losing the values that define us as a people?
As I said earlier, we are on the verge and we are losing it very fast because, as my sister Louise said, that digital platform is good, but it's like fire. It depends on what you are going to do with it. And earlier, you had asked something like, was there something like that in the past? Yes, in the past when you were growing up, the platform for shaming women and the people on their sexuality and all that was the use of sisal leaves, where they would write that so-and-so is a friend to so-and-so, and everybody will read it until that sisal is old. Then when we came to the urban settlement, they could post such kind of writings, shame people or using the wall, using the toilet walls and all that, the staircase walls. And right now we have the digital platform. And as you get it very well, we are going down very fast because we think that being nude, shaming others like that is the in thing, and we are not using it well. Remember, cyber is a very powerful tool. The digital space is a very powerful tool because it is empowering, and if we don't restrict the usage, we might lose the best of it. And therefore, we should just up our game and ensure that people are restricted from such kind of behavior. Remember, internet does not forget. So if people make mistakes like what they're doing and what we don't want, let it be pulled down. Sometimes when the TV stations were were introduced. They were displaying all sorts of programs until I remember they said that they are to restrict some by saying that this one is not suitable for children beyond of this age or for people of this age. And that helped us contain from your end, from the media end, on what to show. And now it all depended on the parents to control the viewership of their children. And here again, I repeat, what do we do with our children, with the mobile phones and with the television? Do we just let it be that they can watch any site, they can visit any site, or they can do whatever they want to post? And it is worrying that we need also to be strict as parents and restrict the such sites which are not palatable at all. So technology is good and we can't do away with it. And you've heard Florence saying that during COVID-19, many women used it. It's now the in thing, the gig economy, where you can sell from the confines of your house and reduce on the workload, especially women go through when they have to when they have to do the gender roles at home. But when we have the digital space, they can simply take 1 hour also, post their things online and then sell. So digital space is very good. What we need to do is regulation, and as parents and as a society, be strict on the usage. Should not just consume everything which comes to us. We need to use it in a mature manner and also constructively, and at the same time take care of our morality. As much as we say we have human rights, you can do what you want, no. There are those which, if they infringe on others, then we will not allow it. So for people posting things which are not good for consumption, they should be taken care of and they should be punished, and punished heavily. And to me, the society should be alert and do what it means, because digital bullying destroys us from achieving gender equality, which we are really striving to get, so that everybody feels he is a human being, God-made, and need to stay alive in society. Thank you.
All right, and I want to take a look at that gender report I mentioned from the United Nations, and this is some United Nations, and this is some of the detail they provide. They talk about a large gender gap continues in technology and innovation despite recent improvements. Women and girls are underrepresented in industries, academia, and the broader technology sector. Globally, women hold only 2 in every 10 science, engineering, information, and communication technology related jobs. And they go on to tell us that bringing women and other marginalized groups into technology results in more creative solutions and has a greater potential for innovations that meet women's needs and promote gender equality. By contrast, excluding women from the digital world has shaved $1 trillion from the gross domestic product, that is GDP, of low and middle income countries in the last decade. And the internet, while offering significant opportunities and information, can expose women and girls to online harassment and abuse. Surveys in Colombia, Ghana, and Uganda found that women reported being concerned about personal data privacy more frequently than men. A study of 51 countries revealed that 38% of women had personally experienced online violence, which we have mentioned already, and only 1 in 4 reported it to the relevant authorities, and nearly 9 in 10 opted to limit their online activity, thereby increasing the gender digital divide. Online and ICT facilitated violence against women increased during the pandemic, as was mentioned as by Florence, as women spent more time online. Lois, could it have something to do with, you know, these biases, this chauvinism that we sometimes see exhibited online? Is it exacerbated by the anonymity that the digital space provides?
Yeah, I think last session, Florence alluded to this quite a bit, and it was very clear. And this was the vulnerabilities that women have. And those vulnerabilities are realities that we are yet, I don't know whether we'll ever succeed with those realities. And that comes a bit from part of our own gender role responsibilities. It comes from our own gender anatomies and everything to do with who a woman is. And that same beauty and that same vulnerability is used more against them than being empowered to be able to also contribute as they should be to the society. And therefore, I think one of the biggest challenges whenever I have had to kind of do what we call psychological debrief to someone who has gone through that kind of trauma, because it's very traumatic for someone to be able to find stuff that they would not want to find on the digital space. And more often than not, they are left wondering, okay, maybe someone has used or misused their kind of engagement and interaction, and maybe even used it in a kind of like what we say, put in stuff, I don't know, I'm losing the word, photoshopped. And then put them out there, and they start wondering, could it be, could it be, could it be? You're not sure who it is, and some of them are trusted persons. And remember, what is the aim? The final, aim of the person who is doing this kind of shaming. It's because maybe they have something they are gaining in terms of viewership, or they are gaining it in terms of there's a mental challenge. And when they do this, it gives them satisfaction. And a lot of times we talk of narcissistic kind of tendencies. And they are the ones that are extremely bad, but they are the ones that are subtle, but how it affects the person that they are working against is extremely bad. So that anonymity is extremely challenging to the person who has found themselves in that state. Because you start wondering, who could it be? And if you knew that person, it sometimes even becomes extremely emotionally traumatizing. And so this is where we have a challenge. Whether it's anonymous and anonymous and you start wondering, who is it that may have done this to me? And of course, the same digital platform begins to throw its suggestions, and then they definitely sometimes you are even blamed for having made yourself available for that kind of thing. Like we always hear that somebody was sexually violated because they didn't dress up well. I'm just wondering, what it is that we could be able to do as well with this digital space. Yeah.
I'm curious, because for me, sometimes you'll get a comment and you'll be like, Kwani, this person, they don't know me, but this comment is so personal, and I'd be tempted sometimes to just hit back, and then I'm like, but if I do that, then I give this person validation, and then it forces me, like a lot of these women, because this data says that nearly 9 in 10 opted to limit their online activity. Yes. I have opted to take that route. I'm very cautious on what I post online, because you don't know how it will be received. And then there's also that piling on that happens that maybe Dr. Mary Goreti can talk about. Is there a mob mentality involved? Safety in numbers, that people are able to bash somebody because they feel tuko wengi in the online space. But Florence, people say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Well, words really hurt. I mean, in fact, when you look at emotional violence, there is no mark left, and it will take, the doctors will tell you, it will take a while for us to see the evidence of how emotional abuse has turned you from the olive we knew to a different olive altogether. And therefore, this one for me, it's worse, because by the time we get to know what's happening, you've already either committed suicide, or you've taken very drastic actions around your life. The woman who was killing her daughter, probably these are things that have been going on for a while. Emotional abuse, for example. I'm not saying that was the case, but if it was an issue of depression and self-esteem and all those things, that is not something that happens once. It continually happens. And while we were talking about keyboard warriors, I always feel that abusers will not easily confront you like face to face. They'll hide behind something. And therefore, the keyboard allows them to do that and abuse you behind the keyboard without you knowing who they are. I mean, I'm sure most of the ladies here, either on Facebook, you've seen that message, somebody sending you hi, like 100 highs. A whole year, this guy doesn't stop. And the minute you respond, a flurry of things. If you don't respond, abuse follows up. Even the committee guys, you know, the ones who call you and say all manner of things. Same thing, using the digital space to get something out of you, but also to really harass you. One thing I wanted to say is that women and people who challenge traditional gender roles by speaking out in male-dominated spaces are regularly subjected to biased media reporting. I'm not saying this media, but in terms of media, social media, the spread of false and content about them and targeted online character assaults, harassment, abuse, and threats continues. I see there's a young girl that posted something when opposition leader Raila Odinga did not show up during the debate, during the debate, yes, the presidential debate. And she posted, she said, you know, Mr. Raila Odinga is like a boyfriend I used to have who gives my expectation, puts my expectation so high and then doesn't show up. The bullying that went online, this girl has never posted about politics, so it was her first time. They went, trolled her photos, removed her photos, say, look at your face, look at your bum, look at, it went that low. And so when it comes to women, it goes that low. They'll start telling you how your legs are not as beautiful as you thought. I mean, they'll say anything just to bring you down. And so I feel like they will never troll a man like that. I mean, how about saying a man has a big stomach, the way my son says, but how does a man have a big stomach? He's a man and he doesn't carry babies. I mean, so why not? They don't troll men in their physical, but they troll women physically. So online violence against women is something that is global. Not just Kenya, but it is global. And I'm sure that study now shows you that all these countries, it's not just Kenya, it's all over the place. So it is us as a country to deliberately, and I like what Millie Odhiambo was saying, to deliberately put in place structures, laws, regulations that then will ensure that this space is safe. And because Angela is here, she can tell us what kind of laws we are missing, or if we are missing at all, is it the application of the law, making sure that we have monies to our police to be able to do the work they need to do. Yeah.
All right. So, Angela, since you have been introduced, Angela Minaya, she's an advocate and a program officer, manager? Programs officer, Kiktanet, and there's an article I pulled off your website that I want us to look at because it identifies the gaps that exist within the legal regime. But before then, Dr. Mary Goretti, is there something to be said for the anonymity that the digital space can provide, as well as a mob mentality that accompanies it, that we pile on people?
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. What I would say is that women and young girls specifically need to be thick-skinned, because digital space is like the public space. And remember, women were meant to be in the private spaces, in their homes, to do all that they should do. And by coming out in the public spaces, they are taking spaces for men, and therefore men must react and push them back to where they belong, and that is in the private spaces. And we have talked about the beauty of the internet, the beauty of the cyber, the beauty of the digital world. It is empowering. And therefore, the young women who are the most users, because they are the ones who are digital savvy, should not be scared. they should go for it, just like we are considering on to go to school, which was a preserve of men. Let us not shy away. Let us not be derailed. I know it affects people emotionally when somebody pulls you down, but that is the tool men have used for a long time, even especially in politics. When they want to pull you down, they bring the issues of sexuality, how you are and what you didn't know come to the fore, so that you feel that you are ashamed, you can't face people, and that is what they are trying to do. If young women are trying to come up to be to serve the society, they are shamed like that. So let us take it as normal, grow thick skin and strive on, because it is through that space where poverty will be elevated. Because you've seen the world richest online user, Alibaba, as I said earlier, is a man and is a billionaire or trillionaire because of the digital platform. So if we shy away from this, if we let young women shy away from it, then we shall be left behind. And it will be, we use the digital platform also to diminish the power of gender stereotypes. Like you heard what Florence was saying, that they talk about your legs, they talk about your shape and all that. These ones are things we know. Let us, when the regulations are not yet there in place, let us block our ears and be deaf, so that we don't hear whatever is coming from, and use it to empower ourselves, use it because the digital world provides various opportunity, and it is also a social, it also an action of social change. It promotes, it gives you the network you want, the opportunities you want, and all that. So we shouldn't be shy away from it. Instead, let us look at policies which can enhance the gender balance in that space. And you shared with us some statistics on girls not doing well in science, technology, and mathematics and engineering. Let our focus be there, so that we might have as many women as possible in STEM subjects. And maybe when they are there, they can discover an app which will help us trace these people very fast and have them prosecuted, so that everybody enjoys being in the public space. As I told you, it is like a public space, and women are not meant to be in the public space. That should be the private. But there we are, we have to be out there, because that is where things are found, that is where everything is, and we need to up our games and not be ashamed of whatever they do. I know it is very painful, but let us also counter. I wish we can also counter. Florence, you are in the activism world. Can we have something where you can counter such kind of misuse of technology, because they are making women shy away, like you just heard what has been shared by Olive. Let us not shy away, let us go on for it. And they say that words, when we can counter it strongly, people will know that it is all malice and it is all not good for coexistence, because we need to coexist with one another in society. And when we want just to keep people away from where things are, then we are being selfish. Thank you.
All right. But before we get into the legalities of things, there's something that Dr. Mary Guriti has said. And if we want to occupy these spaces, she says, then you must grow a thick skin. How do we grow, Lois, this thick skin? And I asked that because, as I said, I was trolling. Not really trolling, but I was stalking. Anyway, I was going through Kicked.net's website and pulling up a few articles on the subject. And this is something you shared, Angela. And this examples of, for example, some posts that have been made in this instance or about Yvonne Okwara. I see a gentleman here say KOT DCI has dispatched a team of detectives to find out how Yvonne Okwara acquired her new brown skin color. So they go, they pick an old image of her in the, you know, that where the lighting was poor, and then they pick a poster image of hers, and then and where she took the previous black charcoal one, you know, and then he jokes Yvonne Okwara currently being grilled at the DCI headquarters. Then some gentleman here called Daddy Smoke tweeted again about her, and he says, seems like Yvonne Okwara is going to need all the psychological support and antidepressants that she thought Brenda would need. I don't know what the context of this is. And then somebody else here posts, like, if you want to see Yvonne Okwara's nudes. This is an example, and I'm only using this to illustrate just where and what the problem is. How, if she sees this, it comes across this post, she's only human.
Yeah.
So you're telling her how does she handle this?
Skin. Yeah. How do you grow a thick skin? And basically that's, let me give one time during the elections, a contestant was, because he needed to kind of develop this thick skin, so he was coming into a counseling center for psychological support and just be able to have emotional muscles. And he was followed, and they actually took a picture of the entrance of that particular institution. And the comment then on some of the headline news was that this particular person, used by competitors, this particular person is psychologically ill, so he's going into a counseling institution. And it really got onto the person. But then when they came in, how were we helping them to grow that thick skin? Olive, to grow a thick skin, you just basically need to appreciate who you are, with your vulnerabilities, whether it's gender-based, whether it's age-related, whether it's financial-related. You've got to just appreciate and know and take stock of who you are. And you've also got to know certain, weaknesses that you do possess, and certain things that maybe people can use against you. And I like that particular issue of skin tones and colors, because we know for sure, like personally, I have a dark skin, and that has been used many, many times. And at times somebody has used it against me, to kind of imagine that dark skin is not the best. You understand? And of course we call it rangia thao for the light skinned. Now, if I begin to appreciate and accept that somebody can use some of this stuff, whether it's tribal, whether it is gender, whether it's age, whether it's education, whether it's family background, then you begin to appreciate who you are. And so that when this comes to you, you've already kind of done your self-preservation. And then it gets to you not as hard as when you are also struggling with that particular vulnerability that is being used against you. So when, like what was mentioned, we know for sure that anytime a woman tries to come up in a field which is male dominated, they will use their sexuality against them, and they say all sorts of things. Sometimes you find that such women, their relationships also are kind of affected, and so it's used so much against them. So once you appreciate that, then that's the thick skin you develop. But above all, when you are in a space where you're vulnerable, it's also good to have some support system. People who will back you up, people who will cheer you up, people who will let you know even when things are so thick or somebody has done the worst of it, they can actually embrace you, hold you, and really cheer you on. There's no human being that has a good support system and that they cannot do whatever they want to do and whatever they plan to do. And we have seen this in the space, in the leadership space. Some of the women that have actually got to the top of leadership and politics in this place, I don't know, Florence, we hardly hear about their spouses, because they are backing them from a very safe space, and even in anywhere else. And people always get to know who is backing you up, and they tend then to really just let you be, because they know these things don't get to you. So if you take them personally, it means you have. And then I think it will be very important to mention that if you have any trauma issues in your background, things like abuses, past abuses, childhood, trauma experiences, things that you have not worked through, and you're emotionally vulnerable, then it can be extremely traumatizing when you get to, people casting some, negativity about you. So it's good to be able to, first of all, go and build your muscle, do the emotional gym, intelligence gym, and build up those muscles before you get into some of these spaces that are extremely dynamic and can turn against you, because it's a double-edged sword.
Okay. Yeah. And Florence and Angela, I will come to you on the legal regime, but just to follow up on this particular issue before we take a break, like they talked about her complexion, Yvonne's complexion in the street. Donald Kipkorir, an advocate in this country, talked about when I first joined NTV. He picked a picture that was taken of me when I was at Capital FM previously and me on air, and he said I had bleached. And then Beatrice Marshall responded in the comments, or rather he posed the question as to whether I had bleached. I don't want to get sued. But Beatrice Marshall responded in the comments explaining that lighting, is a factor. I mean, for any reasonable individual, you would know that lighting is a factor. And I'm not saying he's unreasonable, but but why where women are concerned? I mean, okay, President Uhuru Kenyatta, he was labeled all sorts of things, Jaden, and there are all these jokes that were made about his person, and his, look at his eyes, bloodshot, what does that say to you, kind of thing. And so to the point where he got off social media. Yep. But Dr. Mary Goretti, Lois, they're saying, baki hapo hapo, just guard your loins, so to speak. Why one would imagine that this space would enable us to have nuanced conversations, hear different thoughts and opinions, freedom of expression, foster freedom of expression. But when you look even at the comments on political, like let's say we say this politician said this today and we post on social media, and you go to the comments and it's polarizing and people are just hurling insults at each other. Why can we not debate the subject matter at hand and resort to personal attacks?
In the case for women, we know that perpetrators of violence against women exacerbate existing harmful stereotypes, gender norms and stereotypes against women. That's what they do in the social space outside of social media. Just to, how do I pull a woman down? How I will abuse her, I will tell her husband, which kind of woman did you marry? This I will say. Then when I come online, I'll just type it. And so just continuing to exacerbate the same harmful gender stereotypes that we see in our society. And because we've not dealt with them in our society, they come in the full glare of our social media devices. So we don't change because now we've gone online and become sober human beings. If we have a problem with a woman getting out there in the public space to run for office, as opposed to being home and cooking for her husband and waiting for her husband to come home, instead of campaigning in the evening, the way men campaign at night and everything, then we will still say the same things online. And what I wanted to also say, it has the social media now increases a social intolerance. Like, because we hide behind the keyboard, it's easy for us to be more intolerant than I would. Obviously, there are some things people say about Raila Odinga that they will not tell him face to face. But they use the social media space to do the same thing. There's some things they say about the president that they will never tell him face to face. But because the social media, they will use the social media to hide behind, and perpetrators hide behind. And then online violence has a chilling effect on women's political participation. I don't want us to get out of that point, that it denies an opportunity for women to engage politically, both online and offline, because then women choose to silence themselves. Remember how you chose to silence yourself, keep quiet, or disengage to protect themselves. So we end up, as women, disengaging to protect our families, to protect ourselves. I told you last time I was here, women really went through a lot. Photoshop and everything that really made them cringe and not just go ahead. And it's not just yours, not just your opponent, even people within your party. I know of women, even people within their party who didn't like the way those women were popular, used that as a tool to make them, to shame them so that they don't show face. And so if we don't deal with those gender stereotypes within our community, they show up in the online space. So we have to work backwards in our social spaces before we even get to the social media spaces.
All right, so we take a break, but we come back with Angela, and for her to contribute to already a conversation that was started by them online. This article penned by Sylvia Wanjira, which was posted 2 weeks ago on the legislation that exists, and Sylvia Wanjira says this is a committed and creative LLB candidate who is enthusiastic about advancing women's rights in cyberspace. So we take a look at the rights that exist, the rights we should enjoy, and the legal regime that exists. Does it protect our rights to those rights? On the other side of this break.
The ILO is the United Nations Specialized Agency for the World of Work. At the country level, the ILO does this through a strategic framework that is referred to as the Decent Work Country Program. And this is a framework that is defined through a collaborative process between workers, employers, and the government, articulating each and every country's priorities. The Decent Work Country Program for Kenya 2022 to 2024 has got 3 outcome areas outlined, and that is focusing on human capital development, 2 is inclusive and sustainable economic growth, and thirdly is the need to entrench social dialogue and tripartism. The ILO Director General's message this year is around social justice. It is proper that everyone has a fair chance at life, and work is a big part of social justice, especially as countries continue to recover from the economic and social impacts or effects of the COVID-19.
In your paper this week, the unwanted general in Congo mission. Kenya's Major General Jeff Nyaga exited as commander of regional force in DRC, a scared man. He indicated he has been intimidated, threatened, and called names. Kenya church deaths expose deep-rooted cults in East Africa. Plus our opinion leaders. Comedy speaks truth to leadership. So bring out the clowns. LC Eakuze. Uganda's angry phone holder is moving state agents to action. Joaquin Buembo. Magazine. Home away from home. Finding peace and calm in Kinshasa. For these and more stories, get your copy of the East African.
On my dark marks, I've tried everything from A to Z, even vitamin C, but hardly any results. Nivea Lumina 630 works from day 1 with visible results in just 2 weeks and 71% dark marks reduction in 12. Join the 1 million women already using the #1 Lumina 630 from Nivea.
Gava sasa iko mkononi. eCitizen iko na karibu huduma 5,000 za Gava kama driving license, marriage certificate, business license, passport application, certificate of good conduct na zingine zaidi. Hatua ya kwanza, ingia pale ecitizen.go.ke na ufinye create an account. Hatua ya pili, chagua Kenyan Citizen alafu ufinye create an account. Hatua ya tatu, weka details zako. Hatua ya mwisho, hapa sasa utapata hizo huduma na utachagua ni gani unahitaji. Bas, si ni hivyo? eCitizen, Gava mkononi.
My baby is famous for her happy dancing moves because she's always happy. What's the reason for this happiness? Molfix dryness. It's what all mothers dream of. Come on, mothers, try Molfix baby diapers and be part of our happiness movement.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back to AM Live, and this morning this is what we are discussing: mob injustice online and ICT facilitated harassment and abuse. With me in studio we have Lois No, psychology specialist, Florence Mature, women's rights campaigner, joining us virtually, and I haven't forgotten you, Dr. Mary Goreti Akinyi Otieno, Department of Sociology, University of Nairobi, and we also have in studio Angela Minayo, advocate and programs officer, Kicternet. I was looking at my messages, and Yvonne, so the bit about when we mentioned some of those tweets which were directed her way, and I was torn between not giving these people a platform but also naming and shaming them, but she took it in the spirit in which it was intended. And she says these tweets, because I had asked in what context, and she explained that she defended the first COVID patient, Brenda, and she says KOT rained hell on her. And I was also looking at my messages, and I'm seeing here that there is a press briefing at 10 a.m. This has been shared by Melita Oletenges. Honorable George Gitonga Murugara, together with members of the bipartisan talks, will hold a press conference tomorrow, that is today, at 10 a.m. at the media center. So we wait to see whether that will change things as far as the protests are concerned. But one of the suggestions on a lighter note that Florence has made, she says when her fight, she makes them wear the same t-shirt. Okay, so all right, no, it's just the image in my head. Okay, so speaking of what the law provides in terms of protecting people from this sort of vitriol, harassment, abuse online, I had mentioned that I would be looking at this article that's been penned by Sylvia Wanjira. It's titled "Sexual Harassment in the Kenyan Cyberspace," and so she tells us that okay, so she poses this question: what happens to those who are harassed on social media networks? Will the perpetrators be held liable to Section 23 of the that is the Sexual Offences Act? So there is a Sexual Offences Act she makes reference to. She also makes reference to the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act of 2018, which provides for cyber harassment under Section 27. And this is the recommendation she gives, and it is that there is a need to broaden the definition of sexual harassment to cater to all victims, regardless of the context in which the harassment occurred. This can be achieved by amending the Sexual Offences Act to include sexual harassment done by peers in cyberspace. The amendment will help in providing a legal basis for victims to report cases of sexual harassment and hold the perpetrators accountable. She says there is also need for awareness and campaigns to educate the masses on the various forms of sexual harassment and the legal recourse available to them. By doing so, victims are empowered to speak up and seek justice. And of course, there's the right to privacy that was referenced by the Kenya Film Classification Board that is enshrined in the Constitution. Angela, where are the gaps?
The blog already shows the gaps, that what we have is different regimes. So there is, yes, we're dealing with sexual harassment, but they're dealt with differently. So we have it in the Sexual Offences Act, and then we have harassment or cyberbullying in the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. And so what I had even tried to start the conversation on earlier is that we need to start thinking of an online safety bill. So it will have all these laws harmonized in one place. As it stands, there are so many remedies available to persons who have been abused online that it can also give you the, what do you call, the paradox, having too many options or laws that apply, as opposed to just having one regime that will outline everything very clearly and try to define them in the context of the online space and about safety. Because you see, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act has other cyber-related issues, unauthorized access, you know, hacking, messing with public infrastructure, electronics and things like that. But then now having online safety, everything about child online protection, about women's protection online, we need it in one regime, so to speak, because we have these issues because one law was made before we thought about cyber, then one was made after cyber, but not thinking about women's protections. Hence sexual offense is not really captured in the law. Be that as it may, I don't think that the law is so bereft of remedies. I don't believe that. As a practicing advocate, I believe that we are not reporting enough and we are not trying these cases enough. And what that happens to our legal system is that we have a nice law. It might be ambiguous, as Sylvia has said, but we have laws, okay? But they're not well interpreted in our judicial system. And how do we get interpretation of laws? We get interpretation of laws by people going to court. Okay, you've seen so many times, even public bodies asking courts to interpret, what does this mean? What does this mean? Because the law as itself is not clear. We like to say the law is very clear. The law is never clear. That's why I have a job. Because I can say it means this, someone else will say it means that, and I can try and convince the court that it should mean the way it is convenient for my client, you understand? So the laws as we have them might not be perfect, but as you understand that issues around cyber law are very complex. In that we're now talking about cyberbullying. Maybe tomorrow there'll be a new form of harassment online or something else. So it keeps changing and it's very hard for the law to keep up. So instead of trying to keep up with technology, we should strengthen already existing mechanisms and already existing institutions that deal with online violence. Another thing I wanted to say is that you need to look at remedies differently when it comes to cyber harassment, cyberbullying and all this. Because in the ideal world or in the physical world, the first port of call would be the police or the courts. But this is a different area. This is virtual. So virtual, who are the police in the virtual world? The people operating these platforms, the big tech operating these platforms. So these are the people you should be looking at also as another port of call. We need to hold them accountable. We need to ask them, how are you fixing your algorithms? Why is someone being trolled still going viral? How do you manage your, takedown and content moderation practices? So it's more nuanced than the normal, normal crimes. Again, another issue with this is the perpetrators might be in another country. We've talked about the anonymity, but also we need to look at the transnational nature of the social media platform. You could be trolled by someone in the US. We could be having a very nice cyber law here, but then what happens? Do we have, So the transnational nature of the internet truly makes sense for the big tech to be more liable, not liable, but to be more in control of the content that is on their platform. Before even Kenya serves them with an order to remove this or whatever, let it be that they are the ones to remove it. They're the ones who have a mechanism where a victim says, this post has done this and this. They look at it and they decide that we need to remove it or not. And if not, let the person who's been affected appeal. So you need to look at the cyber laws differently, that there is a quasi-judicial or a semi-judicial framework in the big tech themselves. And I keep telling people to learn about the takedown approaches in each social media platform they use. On Twitter, there are 3 dots. I think the same thing for Facebook, and I think the same thing for Instagram. And what is it called? Instagram. We also have it on WhatsApp. So the 3 dots, just the 3 dots, report. We need to keep reporting. We also, by reporting a lot, we're also helping the algorithm pick up words that might, in Kiswahili we speak, like the Kenyan Kiswahili is a mix of, the Kenyan English is a mix of Kiswahili and English. Sometimes some words will not be picked by the algorithm for being harmful or abusive. So the more we keep reporting, the better the algorithm is at doing its job, which is to filter harmful content. So you need to look at it in a different lens.
Speaking of reporting, from my experience, you know, then Zainab Ismail has shared the same frustration with me. There are fake accounts that pop up. And I was having this conversation with Oliver Mathenge, and he was telling me, so this is specifically for Facebook, and he was telling me, I was complaining to him and I'm telling him, there are people who are taking advantage of others in my name. So some unverified account will inbox somebody and tell them, oh, support me, I'm supporting this children's home, or, you know, this charity, but send the money to this number, which is not my number. So I get calls like, you're supporting which charity again? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And these accounts, even Zainab Ismail will tell you, we have reported time and again. There's such a delay before action is taken. Only recently was one such account pulled down, was Zainab Ismail informed me. How can we get big tech to get more proactive where these cases are concerned? Florence, are there best practices we can draw from?
I was sharing the tool that was used in Zimbabwe to capture data and also to inform decisions around online abuse of women politicians, and I'm thinking that would be a good tool that we could try in Kenya. But also we need to take, like Angela has spoken, we have several laws that if we apply them right now, then we will see how they're working, whether there's even a gap. So decisive action needs to be taken against online perpetrators, and so that perpetrators know that the government will take decisive action against them. So long as that is not done, we continue being in the same cycle. I mean, we'll have another election soon, the way we are going. We'll have another election in 2020?
27.
Yeah, we're always in a cycle of election. And we'll be facing the same challenges. So this is the time to take decisive actions on several things. And like what Angela said, keep on reporting. I'm constantly reporting. I report one page even 10 times. And say whether it's abusive, whether it's sexual violence, I will report all that. But now, how can we as a government protect our own people within the borders that we have control over? And Zimbabwe tried to do that. I think we can be able to do the same. And theirs was specifically looking at women online, because that's the biggest targeted group.
Okay. If I may chime in, sorry. On the big tech issue, we have been engaging big tech, even as Kicternet, for a long time. So we've been engaging Meta and Twitter and trying to find a way that we can offer solutions based on the work we do. So there's always ongoing talks. There's something known as the Internet Governance Forum. I don't know if you've ever heard about it, but it's literally stakeholders in the internet governance space, and some of them are, of course, big tech, because they're a big stakeholder in this area. And we try and, talk things through. Another, I think, development that has happened in this area is the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And what that framework really does is that it reinforces what we have always kept saying, that human rights are not just to be respected by governments, but also entities such as corporate companies that have even as much more immense power as states to either protect or even sometimes cause human rights violations. So because of this framework, these big tech companies are of course interested to try and comply with their human rights obligations, especially in the areas of their operation. So for instance, a big tech company has interest in making sure there's freedom of expression for all people using their platform, including women, and the right to privacy and so forth and so on. So I hope that that helps in you understanding the frameworks that are in place to check big tech companies.
Okay, and I'm curious, are there tips for how to navigate this Wild West, Angela, before I move over to Dr. Mary Goretti?
Yes, I cannot, how can I say that? I cannot emphasize more that Kicternet last year produced an e-learning module on online gender-based violence. This is a free resource. Just go to Google and dial and put Digital Inquiry Kit. Ours was module 5 of that series, and so there is a lesson, a whole lesson dedicated to how to keep safe online. Because we have so many things we can't control. We don't know what the governments will we don't know how governments will respond to online gender-based violence. We don't know if perpetrators will ever change their approach, especially online. But we are encouraging women to start having cyber hygiene practices. How do you take care of your passwords going online? Do you report immediately something goes wrong? Because this can also help to, you know, minimize the harm that can happen. Another thing we encourage is that those who are not even being affected by the post, try to help the person who's being abused. How do you help? You report the post, you distract. If someone has posted about her vying for an election and someone says your skirt is too short, stay on the topic. Say, yes, I support you, you know, you understand? So these are very small behavioral changes, but wholesome in the end. They really change a lot, because for instance we know that posts from women and gender diverse persons are not because of the post, the content. It's about the gender stereotypes and connotations that come with this person. So how you divert attention. Another way to deal with online gender-based violence is to document. You know, take screenshots. You know, all this can be used now when you go to court or when you're reporting to the social media platform. So the first thing after being abused is to take evidence, and if you're not the one being abused, report and distract, divert the attention, and then you can now seek help. You can go get a therapist or talk to a friend. Don't forget these steps. Don't go to talk to your friend before you try and get evidence, or be so involved in the evidence and forget to take care of yourself, because mental health is a real problem and you need to take care of yourself. So this module tries to lay down these steps, and I think it's a good step towards having concrete data, concrete resources for women and gender diverse people to go and read about it. Another thing I like to say is that we always think online gender-based violence is just about women. It's not. It can also affect men. We've seen men also being trolled. I think our president is our former president is a good example of a man who was actually kicked out from the online space because of the trolling by KOT. So we are very much aware that this is a very nuanced problem that does not just have a gender, but we know that women suffer more than men. But that does not mean that men are not affected by online gender-based violence. So the same way we have been trying to kill the stereotype that men cannot be affected by gender-based violence offline, is the same way we need to also work with this stigma even online, because men are also affected.
All right. And Dr. Mary Goretti, some of the other questions that were raised by KFCB, I'll read them out and then attach my question at the very end, is okay, so again they ask, put differently, have we lost our African philosophy of Ubuntuism, loosely defined as I am because you are? Are we really looking out for the interest of the child as we interact with technology, or are we turning the internet, which is one of the most transformative innovations of our time, into, guess what? The same phrasing Oliver used, Wild West. Are we harnessing the true value of social media in general and film in particular? Have we as a people normalized violence and misogyny to the point of being insensitive to these vices? Are we sufficiently dealing with issues of mental health as a society? So, Dr. Mary Goretti, is there usually a power dynamic involved in this? Because if you look at some of the vitriol that people post, you're like, you know, this really is not about me. This sounds like it's more about them than it is about me. Are these people who feel maybe powerless in real life and now come to exert this imagined power online, or take out their frustrations with the world on people online?
Yeah, and only that could be true. You know, it is a platform for also venting oneself, or showing how powerful one is. And as I said earlier, it is a place now, as I said earlier, bullying has not been, is not new to us today. It has been there from time immemorial. It's just that it is evolving. Now it is on the digital platform, and there's nothing we'll do about it. More still will come. The only thing we need to do is how do we venture into the spaces provided for us. And thank you, Angela, you've given us some focus what to do with it. And Lois also gave us some focus on what to do, like take audit of oneself and be confident in using how you use the platform. And once you know yourself, you will not take so much, you will not get so much hurt. And why am I saying that? We had some skills when we were growing up, and even when of use of satire. How do we use satire? That is use of things take life not that serious that you get hurt, but learn to laugh. I want to give an example of what happened some years back. A politician went with the president to Australia for a state visit there, and we were told that he pinched one of the room caretakers on the buttocks, and he was brought back to Kenya in the next plane. And when he came back, people just told him that is the bull of Auckland, and people laughed about it. So even us as women who are victims of cyberbullying, we need to develop some satirical sentiments on if something happens, you joke about it, and that is also one way of developing or growing thick skin, such that it doesn't hit you that much. So, and this is men in this area, men are very good at things, turning things which are negative to positive, and then they move on. And then something which we need to do is also get support from right from the home. You know, once your family knows you, even if they see such kind of things posted online, they know this is our mom, this is our sister. You know, it's just for people to get to bring her down. And we should also know that if you are good, you will be a target of many people. If you're not good, nobody will bother about you. So once you are doing very well in any area, whether it is politics, whether it is economics and all that, people will always be envious and try to bring you down. That's why I said, don't be intimidated. Be like the dog, the deaf dog in a race. Which one? Because it was deaf, and not that it was the best runner, because the rest who had voices and noises and cheerers never made it. But this one made it because it did not get distracted. And lastly, I would say that at the University of Nairobi, especially, we've learned that the gig economy is where the world is going to. We are now incubating women in business so that they know how to use the digital platform. So knowledge is power, knowledge is power, knowledge is power. And once we have it, then we can do very well in whatever we do. And for the Ubuntu philosophy, the more you are, the more I am. It was, but it is diminishing these days because we've become an individualistic society where you only think about yourself and not any other person. And this has also contributed to the kind of bullying we are seeing, because people no longer care about what happens to the other person. You only feel about what is about you and nothing else. So if we can have systems or try to be concerned about the other, because when you are concerned about somebody's mother, somebody's daughter, somebody's son, then you will not be killing them or harassing them online, because you know you won't be traced. But I'm glad that in the past we've seen some fines, hefty fines being given on those people who have abused others. This should continue. However, for women who are not women, girls, we are not really having the muscle to engage lawyers like Angela to represent us in court, and therefore what we need to do is just to keep off, or not keep off, keep on that and develop thick skin and use of satire in whatever happens, so that we take things with a pinch of salt, because the digital world is the way to go. right now I can talk from the confines of my house because of the internet. Otherwise, I would have been on the studio and lost a few hours coming catch up with the class at 10. So here we are. We have to stay online. We have to digit it all. Just look at ways in which we can live as a community and be sensitive to one another, and not just take it that once you have the power of the keyboard, you can do anything you want. But I'm glad and I'm optimistic that very soon we'll get ways and means of tracking these people. Because as we invent technology, we also have people working to ensure that these things can be done. So there is hope.
Okay.
Let us not shy away from the internet.
All right.
Thank you.
And Lois, as we conclude, my question to you is this. Dr. Mary Goretti has said take it with a pinch of salt. Have we been taking it with too much salt? You know, because a lot of the time we forward these things because we find them amusing. So as society, have we dropped the ball? Because, you know, some of us on WhatsApp groups, you know, those two eyes, we have those two eyes, you know, we are just, but we rarely speak up against, no, you know, don't forward this, don't send this, we do not tolerate this. Has that been part of the problem?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest challenges that I have, particularly, and the people that I interact with, including the church where I attend, I sort of like kind of, and I think this is what was alluded to, people creating awareness on what it might mean if you forward certain things, because then you become a similar perpetrator. Because there are certain things that you need to put a stop to. Like you divert entire attention so that if 8 of us receive the same information and it doesn't help at all for me to be able to forward them, then I would be the first one to stop that video from being sent to somebody else. Now that kind of awareness, that kind of skill is still okay. We can bank on it, but it might not be possible. But I know for sure, as Lois, and because people have constantly spoken to people about what I would not be able to tolerate even if you send it into my space, because I will definitely comment about it to you as the sender. So those kind of awareness is possible. But remember, we are in a space where there's so much, I think Florence said, we have experienced so much trauma, especially with the election thing in the last so many years, that we have developed a sense of insensitivity. That I can, you know, sometimes I ask, who was it who was taking this video? Then I begin to think like a psychologist and say that person must have had extremely no sense of sensitivity. And now the second thing is for them to even send it. You understand? So then I have 3 things that are coming very close for me, and if we could hear about them. One is anybody who is, whether it is in the digital world, the people who are hosting this kind of platforms should actually create awareness. You know, free, you know, awarenesses, post it, shout about it on the possibilities of the things that would kind of, you know, infringe on their rights. We could also have people like Kina Angela, like what they have done, you know, coming out, getting opportunities, speaking in their own space. Because I believe I've been speaking every week to about like 500 people, because I come from a specific church and I have some authority over what I speak in that particular space. I have groups of people, so can we take responsibility and just educate them? Then what Dr. is saying is, you know, develop a very strong sense of humor, especially when you are vulnerable and you are in a space where you know, you are aware that things can go north or south. Developing a very, very big sense of humor. And I think teachers of young people now know what it means to develop a strong sense of humor. And very quickly, there was one time I was going to class and then there was a big writing that a teacher is like a brazier. You know, And previous people who got in, students were punished. How can you write such a thing? Then when I got into the class, I basically asked them, okay, what are the qualities of a brazier? And they said, supports you when you're weak. And I said, yeah, so we support you. Then they said, it takes care of you when you are fallen, you know. And then I said, yeah, so that's who I am. And you see, you learn to develop some of this, you know, very strong sense of humor. And if you don't have them, that's when I was saying you need to know who you are. If you're very an introverted person, your personality does not accommodate such, then you need to self-preserve. And I'm so big on self-preservation. It doesn't mean that if you avoid something because you can be hurt, then you're running away from it. So you need to self-preserve. And maybe the last one would be that we just basically need to have skills to manage our own selves and seek support. Support is so big because in anything, whatever happens in your life, if you have somebody supporting you, and that's what Angela alluded to, even if one person comments and posts a positive thing amidst a whole big stuff, it can actually help you to really emotionally preserve yourself.
All right, so I will end the conversation there, but I know you will be back. You will be back again, and when you come back, Angela, the question I'll pose to you is there, even as we seek to regulate, is there a threat to freedom of expression? And Flo, 2 seconds. How do you confront them? Do you confront? I mean, how do you deal with a cyberbully? Do you confront them or do you ignore them?
It depends. I will block if they are sharing images that are then causing more violation, more harm. Because, for example, when we share an issue, as a case or a video of a child being violated, you are exacerbating the thing, like Lois has just said. I will block, I will report. This is me personally. I will look for the cybercrime security police. I will I will go ahead and report. So I'm that kind of person, maybe because of the space I work in. Because some things, if we keep on allowing them to continue, then we are allowing perpetrators to reign free in the cyberspace.
All right. Yes. So, Angela, 2 seconds.
Yes. First of all, I'll say that freedom of expression, especially online, is very wide. So maybe you can invite someone from Article 19. They do such a great job on freedom of expression, especially from the digital department, to discuss it. Lastly, I want women to stay online, simply because we don't have a lot of content being developed by African countries and African women. We need more women online. I keep on making threads on Twitter just to stay visible online, because if we keep staying silent, who's telling our stories? Who's sharing our thoughts? We need to stay online.
All right, so that's a beautiful note on which to end this particular conversation. Ladies, last week you promised you'll be back. You have come back. Thank you. Thank you for contributing. Despite Mandavano, Florence tells me this is what we're discussing: digital mob injustice, online and ICT facilitated harassment and abuse. We've had Dr. Mary Goretti Akinyi Otieno, Department of Sociology, University of Nairobi. She joined us virtually. Thank you very much, Dr. Mary Goretti. Despite the constraints on your time, for taking time to join us this morning. Lois No, psychology specialist, Florence Machio, women's rights campaigner, and Angela Minayo, advocate and programs officer, Kictonet. Please, if you can, pin to your Twitter account. And this is their Twitter account here. It had popped up on the side of, here we go, at Kictonet, the module you were talking about, right? Yes. On online safety. So please pin it if you're able to the top of your Twitter account so we can find it easily. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. I continue on with your world, stepping in for Whitney Lubembe this morning on the other side of this break.